Hi, everybody. This is Dr. Verdialis. Today's subject is your family history and how could it affect you. So, for those of you who don't know me, I'm Dr. Verdialis. I am part of the CNY Fertility family as well as Restara Health and the Verdialis Center for Healing Arts. So I'm going to talk about why is it so important to be aware of your family history and how could it affect you. Um, so let's talk about certain patterns that can go through families. Let's talk about heart disease. So, for example, there are certain genes associated with increased risk of heart disease, and one that is extremely common in the population, it's the MTHFR gene mutation, which will increase homocysteine, and then that becomes an inflammatory process that eventually could result in increased coagulation and heart disease. It is more known in the GYN world because it's associated with increased losses or miscarriages, but then down the road, it is associated with heart disease. So, for example, I was lucky to be part of a study for a few years ago, and I had a full panel of genetic testing for this type of point mutation, gene mutations, and I am an MTHFR gene mutation carrier. And suddenly, I could see my family history because on my mom's side, everybody has heart disease. So then that allowed me to understand how those things go from parents to offspring to children. And then it allows me to take the measures to potentially prevent heart disease in the future. So, for example, with that particular gene mutation, it's a matter of increasing folate. Okay, it's a disorder that people cannot convert folic acid to folate, which is the active form, and cannot be utilized. Folic acid is a type of B vitamin. So like that one, and I picked that one because it's personal to me. But like that one, there are multiple gene mutations that can be inherited, and nowadays there are many programs that you can check what is your DNA made of. Another one that's very big are the oncogenes. So the genes that are associated with a predisposition for cancer. One that is very famous in the medical community is the BRCA1 and BRCA2 that are associated with increased risk of breast cancer at a young age. And then you see the patterns, right? So before we would do gene testing, it was just all family history. So on the BRCA1 and 2, then you would see the mom, the grandma had breast cancer at 35, 38. So then you should check to see if you have the genes so you can make the appropriate measures to potentially avoid that. Some of the artists, for example, Angelina Jolie, she is a BRCA1 carrier. So after her last child, she had a bilateral mastectomy with reconstruction. And some women take it to the point of even taking their ovaries out, okay, because BRCA1 and 2 is associated with breast and ovarian cancer. Another factor, another of the genes that would be, for example, the factor 5 Leiden, which is associated with increased coagulation. So if you look at your family history, and then you have, clotting issues, clotting the legs, for example, brain infarcts or cerebrovascular injuries of any kind, whether it's hemorrhagic or lack of oxygen, then that gives you a hint of potentially that you could have a hypercoagulation type of gene in your system, that maybe a baby aspirin could really help in the long term, prevent some of these issues. And and then you could, for example, take care of your food and lifestyle choices that could potentially increase your chances of having this type of issues later on in life. So I've given you a few of those issues. So going back to how extensive genetic testing is these days. So for example, um, you can even test on how you absorb foods. So that testing that I was telling you, for example, my grandmother had osteoporosis at an early age, and in my genetic composition, I have a mutation in my gene composition where I don't absorb calcium as well. So predisposition to diabetes can be inherited. Pretty much of any disease out there can be inherited. Endometriosis, for example, tends to happen in families. And even though it has not been linked to a single gene mutation, there's a few genes that are associated with increased chance of endometriosis. And I'm sure there'll be more research in the future to pinpoint maybe one or two genes that are associated with endometriosis. So Ashley's asking a question. Does it matter how closely the gene abnormality is related to you? Like if your mother carries BRCA1 versus your grandmother? The thing with this type of mutation is either you are at risk or not. It doesn't matter what is the relationship that you have with the person that did develop the disease. So once you are tested, either you have the gene or you don't have the gene. If you don't have the gene, then your risk is the same as the overall population. Okay, there's several oncogenes out there, Lynch 1 and 2, which is associated with uterine cancer and colon cancer. It's another of this type of genes that will predispose you to have this type of condition. There's a bunch of them out there, like elevated cholesterol, which is called familiar hypercholesterolemia, which shows high cholesterol at a young age and the complications of high cholesterol at a young age. I already mentioned diabetes. There's a few genes associated with being predisposed to diabetes. And then you have on the other hand the autoimmune type of disorders that also tend to run in families, like diabetes type 1, rheumatoid arthritis, lupus, and so forth. So your family history can tell you a lot about what type of issues you could be predisposed to. And with the new era of gene testing and genetic testing, you could be very empowered. And I know it can be a little scary. Knowledge is power. But it could be a little scary when you get those results, because I know it did shock me a little bit. But once you're past that shock, it is empowering to know, because then you can do something about it. So all of these potential family history issues and more so the genetic testing, it's just a predisposition. You're not, you know, sure to have this stuff, but it's good to know so you can again do something about it between lifestyle, diet, and potential, particular changes like I said, the baby aspirin or the folate that potentially could help you. All right. So I wanted to bring that up for today. I hope that this intervention put you to think. If you have any questions, you can message me on Messenger and I will point you in the right direction if you're interested in knowing a little bit more about your family composition. So may you all be blessed tonight, and I'll see you next time. Bye bye.